Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Jonathan. Happy Wednesday. Hope this finds you well. For those of you guys that are live, again, this was kind of a little bit last minute, so we have. It's been a pretty interesting couple weeks up here in Calgary. The weather's warm. My son is down in Costa Rica on vacation. I hope you guys are enjoying a little bit of a spring break wherever you are. But yeah, so this will be for all of you guys that listen on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and stuff like that. Do me a favor when you get a chance, just send me an email and or find me on Facebook, send me a message, and just let me know where you are, what you're doing, where you're listening to me, because that always helps. Because sometimes we put these things out there. I got a lot of lurkers in my life who listen to my work, and then I only hear about them like down the road. So reach out. It's kind of the energy that keeps us going. So I appreciate you doing that. But tonight we got a couple of cool topics before I get into it. Big shout out to uh, as a former Olympian, like one of the things, I have a lot of Russian and Ukrainian athletes in my life that from wouldn't say in my life now, but athletes who I competed against and with and became friends with and know. And what's going on right now is just so weird. Like it's just so bizarre and so weird. And so I just feel for everybody who's involved and just sending good vibes to all of them, coaches, athletes, support people. Yeah, it's been just kind of weird. One thing that has helped me kind of understand all this is the writings of Ray Dalio, Dalio. Ray Dalio is the he's the head of Bridgewater Financial, and he wrote a great book, which is upstairs. um, um, eh, Called Principles, and also his latest one about how how things are in the world and the world order and things like that. I highly recommend that. It's just fantastic to read because you realize this won't be this isn't the first time we've gone through this. It won't be the last time we go through this, and it's really fascinating. So I highly recommend that. It's really kind of helped me understand, as sad as things are on a personal level. It's really good to understand on a more of a global level, and in terms of the history of the world, right? Especially in North America. For those of you guys that listen to me in North America, like just one concept I'll share that really helped me was this idea. Like in North America, we are very short term thinkers. Like we are very much in the now, and that for my athletes, you can only look at athletes to see how that's so true. Like we have short timelines. We're thinking about like how our body feels like right now, like what's going to happen right now. I think of the longest way we look at things is in 4 years. When the next Olympics is going to be, right? Or maybe when we're out of high school or out of college. But in Europe, they'll work in decades and hundreds of years. They'll think like that because they have a much longer history. Like in North America, we think like after anything past like 300 years is a really long time. Europe, a little bit different, but in Asia, especially in China, they think in thousands of years. And that is something I think we can all benefit from in terms of that level of thinking, because it takes a little bit of the edge off all the fire that feels like we're in every day. So athletically, in the wins and losses and the injuries and things like that, but also just in life in general, which I think is really really good. Um, so yeah, so we're gonna talk today. Um, I've got three topics that we'll talk about live tonight, but then what we'll do is these will go on to my newsletter. So if you head on over to theathleteos.com, so formerly athletespecific.com, and sign up for any of our freebies, and you will be on our newsletter list. Okay. So be sure to do that. And if you know somebody who has an athlete or is a coach or an administrator of athletes, I hope you'll send this on to them so that they will subscribe as well, because I'm looking to have a very different take on this than most. So yeah, let's get started, shall we? It's pretty good stuff, and I'm a little late tonight, but whatever. For those of you on the East Coast and are staying up late, appreciate that. All right, so let's go. First topic. First topic tonight is the athlete aren't tired, but the kids or the athletes aren't tired, but the parents sure are. So I may have covered this a while ago. I feel like I was just talking about this yesterday. I'm not sure if I did it live or if I was talking to the parent. one of our coaching clients, or who knows. But the idea that uh, I work with a lot of parents every year who are exhausted, but I also work with a lot of parents who pride, and this is usually the moms, who usually pride themselves on being impervious to fatigue. Right? They just live for their kids, they live for their athletes, they love like being on the sidelines and being, for a lot of parents, like that's their main social activity is getting on the sidelines and or doing a bottle drive or you name it. It's part of their life, right? Their kids, their athletic pursuits are part of their life. And even traveling to Europe and beyond, those are, it's all part of it. But one of the things that does come into play is that whether consciously or subconsciously, parents have fatigue, right? And it usually comes down to resources, right? So when we look at the resources of an athlete or the families or the programs that support an athlete, resources usually involve time, energy, and money. Okay, those three things. So time, energy, and money. And I know a lot of families who are mortgaging their house, to support their children's athletic pursuits. Now, if that's not you, if before you get kind of judgy on that, you've got to go watch my video when values and performance collide on YouTube, because everybody has their own values and everybody has their own limitations and everybody has their own abilities. Like I've told the story before, like for my entrepreneurial families, like I have one family who's a dentist and he was just like, yeah, we're going to go after this and we're going to, I'm just going to add another chair to my practice and see more patients. Great. Right. He's going to hire another dentist. Great. If you can do that, fantastic. I know home builder, same thing. He's like, we just got to do two more houses this year. And my kids' college tuition's paid for. Great. Cool. That's you. But for a lot of my parents who are employees and they have less of an opportunity to kind of improve their revenues, then there's stress, right? And so I call this lifestyle creep. Like personally, like lifestyle creep. Like if you can have too many shoes in your closet, or you can eat out too often, or you can have a bankruptcy, right? You can lose a business and have a bankruptcy, and that creates like the life that you have. All of a sudden, now you have lifestyle creep, and so whatever it is for you, usually when that lifestyle bumps up against income, and the chunk that's invested in athletic pursuits for your athletes is part of that. Okay, so something's got to give, and the thing that usually gives is the adults in the room. And for many of my families, like for I would say for 95% of the families I work with, the husbands are out working. Mom may work full time or part time, but would prefer not to be working at all. But is so busy like running around and washing gear and making sure things are taken care of and travel and expenses, things like that. So it's fatiguing, and you have to be aware of that fatigue, because the most important thing about that fatigue is, just like an athlete, parents also have to recover. So the formula for athletes is train, recover, compete, recover, repeat. Okay. So train, recover, compete, recover, repeat. The more frequently you can do that, so the more training you can get in, um, and then the more recovery you have. So the more recovery you have, the more frequently you can train. The more training you have, the better you will be. But you have to recover. Okay. So just today, as I record this, Ash Barty, who's a tennis player from Australia who won three majors in the last year, I believe, retired from tennis at age 25. And one thing she talked about was like, she was like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. And I was like, whoa, there's some comments in there. Well, it's like, she's has reached a level of fatigue as well. And so some people reach a level of fatigue and break and they're done. And I'm saying Ash Barty broke. That's not what I'm saying. But she's at a point where she's just like, I'm done. I'm good. I'm done. And that's awesome. It's totally cool. Although I give her like a year and a half. Well, maybe we'll see her back. Or Tom Brady, same thing. But we think about it a lot from the athlete perspective, but we don't think about it from the parent perspective. And so what I want to tell you is that from a parental perspective, you also need to recover, right? So if you're just go, 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 and when practice gets canceled, you're like relieved because you don't have to drive anywhere. Or if there was a tournament and it got canceled because of COVID, and you're like, oh, thank God, right? That is a sign that there's a level of fatigue there that needs to probably be addressed. Now, whether that's like self care, whether it's like you just need a massage once a week, whether you need a night out with the girls, or for the dads, if you need a night out with the boys, whatever. Right? The idea is that you need it and you need to answer it. And this isn't just a sports thing. This is a life thing. So, because ultimately something is going to break down, and just like for an athlete breaking down, for parents, they can also break down mentally, emotionally, and physically, right? And usually it comes down as like a cold. It could be COVID. It could be the flu, or whatever. There can also be a level of self sabotage where something happens, and like this is where it gets a little weird. But I've dealt with parents where they've been so fatigued that they have like wished bad things on themselves, and that stuff happens. So if you read it all about like law of attraction or things like that, it will just amaze you that these things can actually happen, and they do. And so I was taught from one of my coaches years and years ago, an Italian gentleman by the name of Carl Brunner. Some of you may know, if we're listening to me, you may know who I'm talking about. But Carl Brunner taught me that the mind always finds a way to rest, and it usually uses the body to do so. And so for an athlete, it can result in an injury, um, but it can also result in an illness, or a sickness, or whatever. Like personally, I'm a big sleeper. Like I need my 7.5 hours of sleep every night, and that means I need to be in bed for like 9 hours, and that's a lot of time, for when you want to do a lot of things. But I know a lot of parents who like who thrive on and talk about not having enough sleep, but then they're like 60 pounds overweight or more, and then what they're bringing on, what's happening is what's going to bring on is a level of some sort of sickness, whether it's a heart attack or high blood pressure, things like that can also happen. So instead of dealing with these things, what a lot of parents end up doing is, in kind of this weird unconscious, not on purpose way, they sabotage their athlete in some ways. And whether it's they get sick, or it's this idea of, in the back of the parents' heads, they're so fatigued that they end up hoping something goes wrong with their athlete, so that they don't then have to take any responsibility for the fact that they're just exhausted and they're waiting for a break. So this manifests itself in weird little comments like, "Oh, you're not going to make that team anyway," or "There's an event coming up and the athlete should do pretty well," but then the parent starts, to just kind of subconsciously will voice this, "Oh well, like it's going to be too hard. You're not going to win, or it's going to be a tough one," those sorts of things. And it's weird, because and there's not like, I'm sure somewhere there's science to back this up, but I can speak to you anecdotally, where I've had conversations with parents where they're really kind of subconsciously wishing this would all just end, and it all comes down to the fact because they're stretched so damn thin. All right, so for some of you, this is going to resonate right away. For others, you'd be like, "What the hell is he talking about? Like, this is totally not us," and that's fine. If you feel that way, that's okay. But I would just encourage you to think a little bit and go like, "Am I tired?" And so ask yourself, like, when was the last time you had a nap? Like, when was the last time you had a full night's sleep? Has your alcohol consumption, if you drink alcohol, has it gone up? Have you been sabotaging yourself with like food, right? And or relationships, or have you, like, are you kind of throwing things at work under the bus because you need more time? Do you, quietly wish, or are you thankful when an athlete's like practice gets canceled, or a trip doesn't go as planned and gets canceled, or you decide that uh you're just like secretly waiting for your athlete to go like, "Oh, I'm so done," right? Those are all signs to me that that level of fatigue is high enough where you need a break. Okay. So when you identify those things, the question is like, well, how do you do that? If if the main stress points are financial, okay, I'll start there, and you realize like lifestyle creep has kicked in, then what needs to happen is and so this sporting pursuit lifestyle is part of that, right? So the idea is, do you where can you cut back? Like where can you cut back? And you can look at things as small as like, do you have like subscriptions on your iCloud account or on your Samsung account that you don't use, and you could save like $5 here, 15 bucks there, 79 bucks there, whatever it is. Where can you cut back? Like, are you eating out so much because you're on the road getting to and from practices or events, and you're dropping 30, 40 bucks for dinner? Can you pack a lunch? Can you pack a dinner? Like those sorts of things. Now, that might seem all trivial to you, but they all add up, right? The other thing is like on a macro level, let's look at it this way. For a lot of my athletes, they play team sports. And what happens is when you're good in team sport environments is there's always a team to play for. And even when you're playing for one team, there might be the opportunity to play to sub in for another team that needs somebody. Well, then that's another drive, and it's another weekend. And if your athlete's old enough to drive, well, it's gas money. If your athlete's not old enough to drive and you're taking them over, well, that's time, right? And there's an opportunity cost there too. Like if you're in the car for 3 hours, and that's 3 hours you could be working on a project for work, or you know ending up like signing another deal, a sales deal, like whatever. You've got to think about those opportunity costs as well, because what the common thread amongst all my parents, okay, all of them, is they don't want to say no to their athlete. They don't. They don't want to say no. But this is where you have to look critically at what are you pursuing. And the one of the main things to understand is like more is not a plan. So I had a parent of a goalie that I worked with for a number of years, and they were just doing really, really well, really, really well. But then they moved from one part of the country to another, and in that new part of the country, their goalie was getting all these opportunities to go play different clubs, different areas, different prospect camps, all this stuff. And the dad went from being very strategic, because in one part of the country where they were, they had to be strategic because they had to travel a fair bit. But now where they are, there's opportunities that are within 2-3 hours drives. So the opportunities to play have gone like through the roof. So much so they will drive to an event for a morning. They will then drive in the afternoon to a second event, right? And then they'll do that all again. They'll do that on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday they'll do it again. So the dad is spending like basically all of Friday evening, Saturday and Sunday on the road at all these events. And at first, he thought that, sitting on the sideline or in the car catching up on work while his son was playing was okay. What happened was he just subscribed to that more became the plan, and he didn't realize the trap that he was in. Financially, it was a massive trap. Although as a goalie, he wasn't paying for every one of these events, but he was still shelling out money for like team jerseys and shorts and things like that, and sometimes helmets and whatnot. But the idea was that kind of in this commitment to his athlete to help give them everything, he was in fact like basically wearing himself down. And then he's quietly hoping that things don't work for his goalie and he doesn't get invited. But that's where more it becomes the plan. That's a trap, and that's what a lot of people do, especially in North America. Is they're like, hey, we'll just do it all. We don't have a plan for what we're doing with our athletes, so we'll just do it all, and that's not the case. So you've got to scale back on that. Then what you need to do is you need to look at your athlete. And if you go to theathleteos.com and download my athlete success framework, it's a little presentation I did. It's about 45 minutes long. You can get the audio for it. The idea is that you have to start looking at your athlete in terms of their three key abilities and the layers around them. and then be strategic as to what you're doing to improve those abilities. Because if you're not strategic, then this is something where if you took your approach that you were taking to your athlete right now at work, you would probably fail miserably, right? You might get fired, but yet with your athlete, it's okay. And what I'm encouraging people to do is look at your athlete like a business, like look like you would look at a business, right? And be looking yearly, quarterly, weekly, like what's happening. Get people together. Like what are we trying to improve? What's going on? Um, and in the next video tonight, we're going to talk about deciding what you want, having your athlete decide what they want now. Um, this all ties in, right? So the idea is you've got to get back to a strategy and not worry about keeping up with the Joneses and realize that, okay, this is what we're doing with, and we're going to do like everybody does the best that they can with what they know at the time, right? And to know and not to do is not to know, right? So the idea there is like, okay, how do we be strategic about this? And let's get back to that plan based on the resources that you have: time, energy, and money. So if, like I said, if money's an issue, you look to scale back where you can, look to save where you can. Maybe you're carpooling with other families. And and you can, and a lot of my parents, like they don't want to not take their, they don't want it. Sorry, that's like a double negative, but they don't want to not be the one driving their athlete, but then they're shelling all the money out for gas. Well, maybe you could team up with another parent, and get, and split the gas cost, right? At least. Well, that's good, right? Um, and so there's a lot of ways there. Energy. As a parent, you have to monitor, like you have to be mindful of your own energy, and that starts with sleep. Okay, starts with sleep. If you are one of those people who are like, oh, I can get by on 3 hours, like you are lying to yourself. Like you are lying to yourself, or you just don't know. Okay, get the book Why We Sleep. All right, read that book, get the audiobook, whatever. But you've got to have a better understanding of sleep, because your brain and your body needs that. And if you're not getting getting it every night, then you're slowly killing yourself. Okay. The other thing you can get for yourself is a Whoop strap. Okay, so whoop.com. There'll be a link below this video if you're watching the video later. For my affiliate link to Whoop, I can't speak enough about it, but one thing it will tell you what your sleep needs are and if you're getting it. And that's I can't stress it enough. Okay. The other thing is hydration. Okay, so if you're turning to alcohol every night or too much caffeine during the day, that is also affecting your brain and how you're operating. So you've got to be mindful of your energy. All right. And it starts with sleep, and it starts with hydration. Nutrition is really one of the, uh, like, I find a lot of people use nutrition as almost an excuse to eat poorly, right? They're like, oh, I had to stop McDonald's because I need food, right? Well, not necessarily. Like you're probably lugging enough body fat around that you could probably run a few marathons, right? So keep that in mind. So time, energy, and money. Okay, those are the three biggies. So because realize your kids, if you took their sport that they're involved in right now and turned it into an Olympic pursuit, and they moved to an Olympic training center where they trained all day, every day, they would do it. They would do it wholeheartedly, right? So if your athlete is not in that environment and they're home, or they're in like a collegiate sport, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe he's playing like 4 days a week. That's just crazy. Well, no. Um, look at elite tennis players and what that's a good example of how much physical activity and training your young athlete could withstand. Like 3 sessions a day, 6 days a week, 2 sessions on the Sunday, right? Like, okay. So this is why I had to share this. Like the athletes aren't tired, but the parents sure are. And what'll happen is that if as a parent, if you're listening to me, you will so slowly self-sabotage the career of your athlete, and you might not even know you're doing it. Okay. So please, please, please keep that in mind. All right. Moving on. So this one is kind of fun too. A a big problem that I find faces a lot of my youth athletes and into high school age athletes. So these are athletes that are either on collegiate paths or they're on Olympic paths. But the idea is that they don't really have a set defined goal. And Vern Harnish, who's a business author who wrote a book called Scaling Up, talks about having a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And what I've noticed, especially over the last like decade, is is young people in general uh, don't like to share or don't necessarily like to commit to something. Uh, and I've seen this over and over again. Like a couple years ago, I worked with an entrepreneur who was a bit of a YouTube star. Like if I shared the name, you know who it was. But the idea with these with these guys was like even they didn't have like a set vision or goal of what they wanted. And what I want to encourage you to do and have your athlete do is I want you to decide what it is you want, like right now. Because the idea is that when you decide what it is you want, then now you have this anchor. Or you have this thing with which um, you can base every other decision you do on a daily basis, like you can base it on, right? So let's say I want to run a marathon, you know, well, uh, if I decide to run in a bad pair of shoes, is that helping me or hurting me? Like, well, in the example I'm trying to give you is going to hurt you, right? Or let's say you're trying to lose weight, as you know, a lot of people can relate to that. Well, if you go have a Pepsi, right, then you're kind of stifling that. Doesn't mean you can't get back to it later, but right now the decision you're making is one that is not leading you towards your goal. So the idea is to have that goal in mind. Now, when you then set that goal in mind, now you're going to back things up and you're going to decide as a group, as a family, like the athlete and the support staff, mom, dad, any other support staff, the athlete mastermind around them. The idea is like, okay, is this helping us? Is this hurting us? In the last week, how did that go? In the last month, how did that go? In the last quarter, how did that go? In the last year, how are we doing? Like, are we getting closer to that goal or not? Because for most athletes, it ends up being kind of this vague thing. It's like they're all on a path like everybody else around them is on. And so they all look like they have the same goal. And so a bunch of hockey kids all look like they want to play in the NHL, but that's not true. Like within that group of kids, there's some kids at the practice who are practicing without any goal in mind. And then there are others who are going and they're going like, no, I'm learning this skill in order to make this move so that I can make it to the NHL. It's very different. It makes the weight of practice very, very different. So what if you're a parent listening to me and your kid is like 10, and they don't know, pardon me, their ass from an elbow, right? The idea is like they may say like, "Oh, I want to be a Division One. I want to play Division One," and you're going like, "I have no clue if this kid's going to be able to like basically clean his own butt." But the idea is like you want to encourage that. You want to just say like, "Okay, great. Yeah, you want to play D1? Awesome, awesome. Who's your favorite player? Oh, it's this guy. Great. All right. Or it's this girl. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Um, let's get a poster up on the wall. Let's do some research. Hey, guess what? I heard from your English teacher. They want you to do a biography of your, of somebody important. Well, why don't you ask your teacher if you can do your biography on so and so? And oh, great idea. Now everything gets better, right? Because your athlete has decided, like, okay, that's what I want to do, right? And so now there's the anchor, and now there's basically a focus, and so things that fall outside of that focus fall away, and then anything that falls inside that focus helps them get closer to, right? Gets closer to. So it also then helps the family to decide, like, okay, so I worked with an athlete a number of years ago who was a tennis player, and you know they were trying to move from, they lived in the western half of the United States, and they had a chance to move to Florida, where their athlete could now train with a better coach. Well, guess what? Dad and mom started looking for career opportunities in Florida. So they ended up selling their house. They both got jobs in Florida. Awesome. Now they're athletes playing, and it's all good news. But that wouldn't have come without this focus. Like, okay, no, I want to be a really good tennis player. I want to play professionally. Cool. All right, where are opportunities for that? Let's pursue that. So when you have that, when your athlete decides that, then now you have that opportunity with which to get more and more focus, and that usually frees up resources, time, energy, and money because you're able to cut certain things out, right? You're able to say yes to certain things and no to other things, all because your athlete just decided, hey, I want to go to the Olympics, or I want to play pro, or whatever, like whatever it is for you. Okay. So it's really important. So sit down with your athlete and decide and help them just kind of go like, are we doing this or what? Right. And if they hesitate, you go like, okay, what are you hesitating on? Are you worried that you can't make it? Are you worried that, what are your fears, considerations, and roadblocks that you're throwing up in your head right now? Because sometimes what those fears, consideration, roadblocks may be has to do with the parent, right? Maybe the athlete is worried about committing, has all the talent in the world to reach their goal, but they're worried that it's going to stress mom and dad's relationships or dad's job or who knows what. But those conversations open up other conversations, and it gets really, really juicy and fun, and it gets positive. And but it only comes when you start having those conversations and your athlete decides what he or she wants. All right. It's really, really important. All right. So I hope that's a good one. Listen, if that resonates with you, do me a favor and send me an email, coachedwards at athletespecific.com. Head over to the athleteos.com, formerly athlete specific. Make sure you subscribe for all our freebies and you'll be on our newsletter. And then share this with somebody. Would you like share the link to this with somebody that you know who needs to hear it, because that's how this grows, and that's how we meet more athletes who've got big athletic dreams, as well as the parents who support them. All right. So I appreciate you listening, and yeah, we'll get on to our next one. So the next one tonight is, as I write down. So for those of you guys listening on the podcast, welcome. Um, Wherever you are, do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe and all that good stuff. It kind of helps the energy. Or like I work with athletes. For those of you guys who don't know, this is the first time hearing me. So I run a program that I've recently rebranded called the Athlete OS, so the Athlete Operating System. And I work with athletes and families who have big athletic goals, whether they want to play their sport in Division One, or play it in college, or they're just trying to make the varsity, or they're trying to become professional athletes or Olympians or things like that. So I wrote a book called An Athlete's Guide to Winning in Sports and Life, which I hope you have a copy of. A lot of families will read this with their athlete, like together. They'll order a couple copies and they'll read it together. Um, it's the only book of its kind that looks at sports kind of and looks at the athlete holistically. So we hit number two in sports psychology, but the problem was, so I was pretty proud of that. But sports psychology, which really, as I've gotten older in my life and looked at the impact of sports psychology on my athletic career, I realized sports psychology just works with like one part of the athlete, like the mental processing, and that is such. I just don't believe in that anymore because you can't silo an athlete. Like an athlete has to be, you have to worry about like the person as a whole, right? And that comes down to their abilities, their life skills, their resources, and their beliefs in everything that's going on. And that's not just one. That's not sports psychology. That's just so limiting. Um, so today's topic that I wanted to cover is this concept of um, take 100% responsibility for everything. Okay, and this is really hard to do, right? It is really hard to do. And I would like to think, I would like to say that when I was a young athlete, I did that. No, no, I didn't. You blame the ref, you blame the weather, you blame your equipment. But when you can get your head around this idea that when you blame anything like that, your brain just shuts down. It doesn't take, um, it doesn't work in a way that it's supposed to. So our brains are designed that when we are looking for something, if we have set our mind to something, a goal for lack of a better term, then what our brain starts to do is it eliminates noticing things that are not going to help us towards that goal, and then it starts to be aware of things, even small things, that can help us. Okay. So so when you have a goal, when you have a focus, now you are and you're working towards that. When something doesn't go your way, then you have this interesting decision point. You can either blame that on somebody or have like victim mentality, like people are out to get you or things like that, or you can then take responsibility even for the most egregious of things, right? So the idea that you've been uh, hard done by anybody, when you say that, then your brain just goes like, "Ah, okay, nothing we can do," and that's not true. So I wrote about this in my book. I gave an example about a hockey team that I had been kind of around and working with, and this team lost. They lost this game, and what ended up happening at the very end of the game, they got a penalty, and then they were man down, and they got scored on, and they lost. And what everybody did was they blamed the ref for a bad call. When in reality, if you broke down that entire game, right, broke down the entire game, there's a million touch points um, that could have changed everything from Jimmy learning how to skate backwards better, to Chris making a better decision in the second period, uh, to to the actual play that caused the penalty, where a player could have done any number of things to have avoided that situation, where he ended up being in a position to hook or trip. Um, I can't remember now. Is it hook or trip the player down? Last year, so I'm a big Formula One race fan, and and Formula One races, there's like 23 races in a year. Lots of races, lots of things, and drivers earn points for every race, and but it came down to the last lap in the last race, both cars tied, and all of the focus was on what happened on that last lap. However, as an athlete, as a team, as a program, you have a million touch points prior to that that you could improve. And so the great kind of champions, what they'll do is they will look at those other things, okay, and they will make 1% improvements, even smaller, to on a bunch of little levels, so that they avoid coming down to the wire. Because if you take the path of two teams or two athletes, they've all done so many different things to get there. Um, well, there's if you just look to blame the last possible decision, you miss all those opportunities to learn. So one of the things that I find happens with my parents of my athletes is that if something goes wrong for the athlete, the parents are quick to blame the coach, they're quick to blame the ref, they're quick to blame like politics or preferential treatment, anything like that, because they don't want their athlete to feel disappointed. And that is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. Okay. As a parent, you want your athlete to experience as much disappointment as they can handle, and you want to focus on their skills to handle the disappointment. Now, what's really interesting there is as a parent, you may lack the skills necessary to handle disappointment. Right. So then you project that on your athlete and go like, "Oh, wait a second. Yeah, I don't get that. I would totally blame the ref too. It's totally the ref's fault." Because you can't take the responsibility and go like, "Well, yeah, if I was in better shape physically, if I had better physical ability, technical ability, tactical ability, I would have avoided that altogether." Right, so you have to be really aware of that. Now, granted, in some situations, finding another coach, finding another team, moving to another country could give you more opportunity with which to pursue your skills, and that is very valid. It is very valid, but a lot of athletes and parents will just jump to that right away, And then when they go to that new environment, they find out that, oh, wait, in fact, the common thing between all of that, all of their past failed situations and them is the athlete, right? So if you don't fix the athlete, everybody looks to fix the symptom, but they don't like to deal with the cause. And what I want to encourage you to do is that when you take 100% responsibility, you are looking 100% at the cause, right? Oh, well, we got sick 2 days before, that event. That happened to an athlete I know this past Olympic cycle. Um, One of the best athletes in their country was set to make the Olympic team, but this athlete had a history of not dealing with really good pressure-filled events. And wouldn't you know it, the day of their event that was going to decide the Olympic team, they came down with a stomach bug. Yet no other athlete on the team came down with a stomach bug, and they viewed it as like unlucky, like food poisoning, but none of the other athletes had food poisoning. So that to me was like a perfect example of like, yo, this has nothing to do with food poisoning. This has everything to do with the fact that you weren't able to manage the stress that came down leading up to that event that you should have won. Right. So that can seem harsh, but that's what it's all about. Because this athlete had a history of prior to that of doing that same thing, right? Blaming, these things on something else. Whereas if she hadn't done that, she would then be able to go like, "Oh, yeah, all right. I'm using the excuse of food poisoning as a way for me not to be able to compete come um, when it matters most." Right. And so that's really important to understand. So that's just one example. I could give you like 1,000 examples of that. But the idea here is that even when it hurts the most, even when you're the most frustrated, even when you don't want to admit that things are bad, right? And that that your athlete is incapable of doing something because you don't want to disappoint them. The athlete has to go like, no, I'm not good at this, right? So what do I have to do from here? And really address that head on, right? And create a bit of an issues list and go, these are all the things that I don't feel like I'm good at. Let's address that and let's make you better. Okay. But if you're the parent listening to me right now, you too have to identify like, am I taking 100% responsibility for this situation? Am I allowing my athlete to take 100% responsibility? As much as it sucks and it hurts, I want my athlete to be to embrace that disappointment and learn from it, as opposed to trying to bottle it up and get upset and not deal with it. Okay, because then you miss the learning points. And we want an athlete who's absorbed so many learning points that they can accept any challenge and take advantage of any opportunity when it comes. Okay, so that is an interesting one, I know, and it can sting a lot, right? It can sting, but the athletes who take that to the best of their abilities are the ones that are able to learn, even when they disagree. As a coach, I've had situations where I've told an athlete or a family what they've done wrong, and sometimes I've raised my voice to do it, and many of my parents, like, and my athletes are like, "I get it. I totally get what I get it, I understand." But some are like, "No, I'm a jerk. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about." But that's where time tells, right? Time shows you, like, when you take 100% responsibility, time you have more time. When you don't take responsibility, you have less time because you're operating on kind of a false sense of awareness of like of talent, right? So if you're like, let's say, like, again, you guys know I work with a lot of goalies, so I have goalies who are on certain teams where they're the number one, but I know that once they get away from their team, that they're not nearly number one anymore. But the idea is like, well, okay, while you're on that team where you're number one, but you still have so much to improve, are you willing to improve on these things in the face of not having an immediate example that you're improving because your level is higher than everybody else? So let me just rephrase this. So my approach when I was trying to become a lacrosse an all American in lacrosse was that I wanted to be the number one goalie on my team, and then I wanted to be the number one goalie like in my region, in my school conference, which was the Independent School League, and then in my region, and then in my state, and then in like New England. And my goal was as I did, the more that I did that, the more that I would prove to myself that I was one of the best goalies in the country. The problem was when you left your team where you were the number one goalie, and then you played and you were the number one goalie in your region, when you came back to your team, it's easy to kind of let off the gas. But what you have to do is be taking responsibility and going like, okay, yeah, I just made this save in practice, but it wasn't that clean. Or I let that goal in and that wasn't a very good shot. Or maybe it was a great shot compared to that next level that you're trying to achieve. That's where you have to be super focused. And a lot of families can't do that. That's where I encourage like working with someone like me or having an athlete mastermind with which somebody you can bounce ideas off and they can tell you honestly, no, you're not doing very well. You got to work on this, this, and this, or else you're gonna get caught out. Because that's where improvement really comes from. And it all comes from taking 100% responsibility for everything, even the stuff you don't like. Okay. So listen, if you're listening to that and that resonates, do me a favor, like shoot me an email, shoot me a message, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook. Um, Olympic Jonathan is my Instagram handle. And you can find me on Facebook as well. Same place. If you're listening to this, leave me a comment, hit the like button. Um, Leave good comments if you're going to leave a comment, right? Don't get all uptight. Don't get all offended because that's only hurting you, not me. But let's move this conversation ahead. And when you're ready, come join me, right? And I can't wait to get you as part of our Athlete OS program. And if I can work with your athlete individually, I can do that too. So, as always, have a great week, everybody. If you've got a topic you'd like me to cover in a future episode, be sure to, again, you can leave a comment or send me a message. I'll happy to do that. And yeah, I look forward to hearing about you and your athletes. And if you're the athlete listening, I can't wait to hear about you and your story, what's going on. And I'll see you guys next week. Cheers.